To give the kind of the spirit of what things were like back then, Steve, I'm sure you've seen this, and you'll know which car it was. It might have been the Goldfinger Dodge. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but there's a photo sequence taken at a race where first round, car gets out of shape, gets halfway off the track, and rolls. Right? They crashed this car. The roof is crushed, the windshield's blown out, it's all a mess. They bring it back in the pits. What was that?
They taped it together and ran it again. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, it's funny.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna make it on the round.
Here's Goldfinger right here. Yeah, one thing I love to do is to pick up old magazines like this issue of Super Stalkers in Action. And if you read these things, from month to month, or even sometimes year to year, you can actually chart a funny car evolving. In the case of the Brutus Gto, which was built by Lou Arrington and, yes, Jim Lieberman before he was Jungle. It started out as a regular Pontiac GTO, not even an altered wheelbase. It had a straight front axle, but a supercharged 421. And in fact, it was brown before it became orange. And you only know this by looking at old magazines where the car was in the background. Of course, then they went to the Mickey Thompson Hemi heads for the Pontiac V8. Yes, Mickey Thompson made those like in 62.3. They were actually obsolete when Jungle Jim and Arrington got them in 66 and 65.
Is that the three-piece pushrod cars?
That's right. Yeah, some weird stuff. Also, Mickey made those for Ford FE engines and one up in a Thunderbolt, I believe. Butch Leal's Thunderbolt had one of those. Yeah. But anyway, so they realized that was a good way to go, the blower and the Hemi heads, but the Pontiac block was blowing up. So they finally said, let's just go with a 392 Chrysler. And they basically put a fuel dragster engine with a very mild dose of nitro. But the only problem was at the top of the track at 130, 40 miles an hour, the car would start to get floaty. So they moved the engine rearward, so the blower was no longer coming through the hood area. Instead, it came out kind of closer to the windshield. So engine setback, which was one of the key elements of of the tube frame funny car. And so anyway, if you see enough old magazines, you'll watch the Brutus Gto evolve from step to step. And Tony, to your point, they were using stick welders and rivets back then, where now we have Miller-Matics and that kind of stuff, so we can actually look professional. But the old cars were cool. They were rough and crude and honest.
Well, one of the things that happened beginning in like towards the end of 1965 into early 1966 is that the cars were running consistently in the 160, 170 mile an hour range. And at that point, and like this picture you've got of Grady Bryant's car, at that point, the car becomes a wing and wants to fly. So there was, to that point, nobody had given really aerodynamics any type of consideration. So you start to see in the beginning of 66 or so, where they're dropping the cars and they're building airfoils to block the air from getting underneath the car, because that's what would happen. The air would get up underneath the car and it would just take off, like a plane. Yeah. A lot of cars like that. Tom McEwen had built a rear engine Barracuda, all steel rear engine Barracuda, and that was kind of like almost like a factory effort. He was supplied all of the parts from Chrysler, and that thing flew like a plane at Lions. So, right. Yeah, there were a lot of things, and actually, in an answer to that, because that was just such a drastic thing, McEwen built a car called the Super Mustang, which, like Garlitz's car, was a slingshot dragster with this. There was really nothing Mustang about this car at all, except I think maybe it had a horse in the very front of the nose. Right. But it was a bubble top slingshot dragster called the Super Mustang. Yeah. There was so much crazy stuff going on. And that's the thing. It's like that evolutionary period. You go from 1964, okay, it's factory experimental, to 1965, it's like, okay, let's just go match bash these things. So like the middle of 65, where it was a feeding frenzy, everybody wanted into this, to 66, where you had this evolutionary split where the serious race cars, the flip top cars, started on their evolutionary path to where we got today. And then you had the circus cars, which in fact at Lions, they used to play circus music when they would bring out the funny cars. So at that point, you had people building every kind of contraption you can imagine. You have like I said, Junior Brogdon's Phony Pony had 2 injected small block Fords.
The Holy Toledo Jeep.
Wheelbase.
Yes, the Holy Toledo, right on. Yeah, a lot of good stuff.
You had the terrifying Toronado, which for my money is if I could only see one car watch one car make a pass in the whole history of drag racing, that would be the one. I would want to see the terrifying Tornado do its
John
thing.
Smizer. John
Smizer, who was a dragster racer. And in fact, if you find those old magazines, there was he did an article. I think it was in Drag Racing USA. It might have been. I don't remember which magazine it was, but he did a story like, you know, what have I done? Because he was like, I went from like, you know, this straight up dragster guy to now this freak show, and this car is trying to just kill me every time. But that's what people are paying for. Yeah, the Hearst Terry Olds.
Yeah. More of the same, twin engines, insanity. Yeah.
Oh God, there were so many. You had the Peanuts car,
yes.
which was first an
LTD,
the 4-door LTD, which was actually a Ford prop. It was a prop for a Ford commercial. They had this commercial where they lifted the LTD and with a helicopter and stuck it on top of a mountain. Well, they built like 2 bodies for that, and so they got their hands on this one body, built a tube chassis underneath it, and erased under the Peanuts name. Yeah. And then that same group of people did a Jaguar E-Type.
So a cover of Carcraft magazine, purple. It was a purple car. Yeah,
beautiful car. A really beautiful car. But it snuffed the driver on like the 2nd or 3rd pass.
And Marv Eldridge, I think, died in that car. That's right. Yeah. It's
Marv Eldridge.
I believe Marv somebody. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
No, I think it was Sheldon Gecker.
Yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, the wings, you know, the thing about spoilers, this routine here, you know, in the book, I started with a cardboard thing, but this right here, and to your point, Tony, they say that, you know, most cars at 150 miles an hour become lousy airplanes. And, you know, I used to cover the NMCA drag racing series, and Billy Glidden and folks like that in their 5-liter Mustangs with crazy nitrous systems were going 160, 170 by the end of the quarter mile. And I stood at the top of the track one time with my camera and a motor driver just as they went by. And almost every single one of them, the lower chin, which on a standard 5.0 is made of plastic, has those lights in it and stuff. Well, those things flap like. And one time I talked to Billy Glidden. He says, you know, I hear this weird flapping noise at the top of the track. I said, that is, Billy. That's your chin spoiler moving at about 20 times a second as you go through at 160. And almost every time also the hoods, plastic hoods, do this weird bowing thing that drivers usually aren't even aware of at those speeds. So it was a proving ground. It, you know, basically a torture test for vehicles and what can and cannot be done was explored in the realm of the early door slammer funny cars and flip top cars, you know. But yeah, an amazing time, really, you know.
Well, this is such a hard topic to cover in a cohesive way. Because it covers so many different areas and so many different, like that short period of evolution, that 2-year period of evolution was just all over the map. And we could sit here for the next 2 hours and not mention like really significant cars, really significant events that happened in this period, because there's just so much of it.
Right, and it happened so fast.
Yeah, it's a question of what to leave out. That's the problem. It's a good problem. It's
like a part 2 video.
Yeah. Well, I think there's got to be a part 3 to this.
Oh, the cleanup video.
Sometimes a picture will basically sum it all up. Right here, went from this to that in 1964-5. So a radical, and then a difference, of course, being the wheelbases shoved around. The standard torsion bars went away. We got a tube axle, and on the other side of the car, of course, the 383s, the wedges gave way to injected Hemis. You know, but again, you know, from Grandpa's 383 nothing mobile to a match race winner. And the beauty of it really was that now this is the Ram Chargers, of course. That was a factory. I mean, it doesn't get any closer than the Ram Chargers. They were actually engineers. But the beauty was back in the day, till about 1968, the 3 of us could have pooled our resources and built ourselves a match racer, and, you know, maybe head off on the weekends, you know, leave work. Hey, boss, I got to leave on Friday or, you know, Thursday night. Can I not be there Friday? That's fine. Go do what you got to do. Just don't get killed. And then, you know, come back on Monday with $800 in our pocket from having run our GTO ultra-release match racer up against whoever came through town. So it was a great time. Not to be, you know, I don't think it's going to be repeated. Although, you know, I think the world's fastest, like small tire drag racing of today, that stuff, although it's not a new phenomenon, that's as close as it gets, just grassroots, you know, hardcore run what you brung racing.
Right. And then $800 might not sound a lot, but like a lot, but I mean, you could have bought that new Dodge again for $3,300. So, that's $800 went pretty far back then.
Yeah.
My former partner with the Top Fueler, Bobby Lagana, he was actually part of that whole 1966 Match Bash thing. He built a car called the Chevamoco.
Yes.
Are you familiar with it?
It's a yellow frame, a blue body, I believe, and it
was a Ford Falcon that was a stolen recovery, and he bought the thing for dirt cheap, and he built a big block Chevy for it and extended the front wheel. He didn't move the back wheels. The back wheels were stock, but he put the front wheels under the front bumper, and he ran that thing with an injected big block Chevy for years. And somebody recently found that car a couple of years ago and restored it. So it's actually around. You guys want to see a wild piece of the era, right? A low buck, because Bobby was always the ultimate low buck guy. Believe me. But that's besides the point. You guys want to see what the kind of backyard engineering that was happening at this period of time? Check out the Chevamoco.
Yeah, it's funny. I ran into that car back at, I think it was the Nationals in Indy back around 5 years ago, something like that. There it was. It was on the show car area, and it was looking great. I mean, again, the yellow frame, the 12-spoke spindle mounts up front, and the rat motor, and a Ford of all things with a Chevy engine. And of course, you got to remember that the allegiance to keeping the engine and the body by the same make, that really only applied when you were factory backed or looking for factory backing. But in a lot of cases, guys would take whatever they had. And often if you're going to go fuel racing, get an old 392 because you could blow it up and get another one. Well, for a while you could. Or the rat motor, which was absolutely very potent. I have to say too, one thing, we know that of course, Mopar and Ford led the way with the factory based FX and, match race type stuff. General Motors in 1963, they kind of tied their own wrists because they had an anti-racing edict that came down because they were facing antitrust legislation. So GM management said, hey, whatever we're doing that's high profile, cut it out. So that brought an end to the Super Duty program, Chevrolet's small block and big block programs, all that kind of stuff, the Z11, that kind of thing. And I say to myself, if General Motors had not have done that, I'm sure that the Chrysler Hemi and the Ford Camry would have looked pretty puny by comparison to the crazy stuff that GM was brewing. In fact, there's Pontiac and Olds Hemi engines. There were absolutely running engines that were built, but they never made it to production. But how cool, how crazy would that have been? I'm a Mopar guy, but I hate to say it. If GM had unleashed all the King's horses and all the King's men, the 60s match race scene would have been a whole different thing.
Oh, right. Yeah. That Oldsmobile had a dual overhead cam Hemi, and then Buick had a twin turbocharged nail head. And it was nuts, but that was the stuff that was getting outlawed right off of the paper. So, but
in that Match Bash era, you had a lot of Chevys, a lot of big block Chevys were in there, and they were right in the thick of things. Lieberman ran one before he hooked up with Lou Arrington. We ran one in an Nova called Hercules. Oh God, there were so many of them. Bruce Larson had that Chevelle. It was big block Chevy power. There were a lot of Chevys that were really in the thick of things in that early period of time. The Chevy didn't really become and when I say Chevy, I mean like stock Chevy motor. They throw a cam in it and
billboards,
blower on top, and throw 75% in the tank and shoot them. Right. The Chevy actually didn't give up completely to the Hemi until around 1970.
Yeah, the advent sort of the designer engines, of course, Keith Black and Ed Pink, which the color names is kind of interesting, but it's completely random. But, you had a black or a pink Hemi under your fiberglass Camaro or Firebird or whatever it was. But again, you could buy a crate Hemi from the Ram Chargers, this fuel burning Hemi that was set up by the guys at the Ram Chargers, and, Leroy Goldstein, folks like that would build engines and ship them out. So like in 71, 2, 3, you'd read about, the latest funny car, whoever it might be, running a Keith Black Hemi or an Ed Pink or whatever. But, it became to the point where I think 2 or 3 guys could no longer go ahead and do that. And of course, we know that, Mongoose and Snake in 1970, the first first real corporate sponsorship. I know that Smirnoff Vodka had a hand in 68, 69, but the first big deal sponsorship was the Mongoose and Snake Hot Wheels, Duster and Barracuda. So that kind of opened the door to the professionalization of funny car racing. And the three of us, as much as we'd love to, we could not begin to go fuel racing. But I know, Tony, you certainly, you know, you and Lagana had quite a go of it. Was that certainly done for fun? It wasn't about getting rich, right? You know, how'd that go?
I bounced from car to car as a wrench, as a tuner, as a diver, as whatever anybody was going to pay me for on any given weekend is what I did. But my personal goal was to make a living from drag racing. So I would get paid per weekend, you know, per day, per diem on those things. But I partnered up with Lagana on the dragster. I had my own fuel altered, and it was still at the very end of the time, the era where you could make money match racing, and that's what we did. We ran the dragster. See, a lot of people, you can't really conceive of this, and this is like really getting off topic, but we never won a thing with that dragster, with the Top Fuel dragster, but we made a living off of it because we were able to match race it a couple of times. Like, we were the sacrificial thing. Whenever Shirley Mulvaney would get booked into an East Coast deal.
First round fodder, but you were there.
Say that again?
Your first round fodder, but you were there, you know.
Exactly. So, and even at that, we would go to a national event and they pay more for if you qualified for a national event, you got $6,500. This was in 1992, 1993. You got $6,500 for qualifying, which covered all of our expenses and there was a profit. But if you won first round and went to the second round, they only paid you about $1,000, and it would cost us $2,000 to make a run. So basically, we would go there, we would qualify, get our money, and then kind of, you know, not be too concerned about making it to the second round because then it's going to cost us money.
Interesting. I never knew that stuff. Okay, I'm a professional spectator. You know, I've never really.
For a while, I mean, we were supporting ourselves off of the car.
All right. And here's the big question, right? You know, in my, you know, efforts to sort of get some attention focused on altered wheelbase cars for the street, I've often thought to myself that, you know, now we've had nostalgia drag racing, you know, since the 80s, you know, Blair, I forget the guys, but it doesn't matter. But people would sort of do these things, nostalgia drag racing. Well, cars would show up, a 64 Dodge with weld wheels and a 440 with an Edelbrock, you know, that kind of stuff. Nobody really did anything pure. I think there's room in this world for a nostalgia match race series based on cars that are strictly correct for nines, but I think that a series of seriously hardcore, well-done cars could draw a crowd. What do you guys think?
It was tried back in the 1990s. I ran around with a bunch of guys in the Chicago area at that period of time, and it was what you're talking about was actually tried. You had Brian Coleman built an open wheelbase 65 Coronet. It was blown on nitro.
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, the Rob Bruce had a car called the Zombie, which was a 65 GTO, older wheelbase car blown on nitro.
Now here's the thing. I know where you're going with that, but to my eye, I'm fully aware. I read about it. They were not right. They were wrong. A lot of them, I mean, they were cool. They put fire shows. You know, Jeff Stunker took that shot with the car burning out and stuff. I mean, some pure shit. Pardon my French, like a Jungle Jim, a true correct car. You know, not saying use, you know, 1965 cylinder heads that are full of cracks and stuff, but I mean, you know, limit yourself. I hate, you know, like the bracket racing thing where you can go a lot faster, but you're slowing down, and that's no fun. But I mean, just build a bunch of like gasoline injected gas powered cars that look the part. I mean, everything about them. You know, the modern stuff was cool, but like the Zombie was cool and stuff like that. It was in Drag Racing Monkey. Steve Collison featured that car. They put it in the middle. It was cool, but I think something pure, something hardcore, that just a series of cars that like recreate the 65 B-line, or maybe 66, a little cooler that way, 66 B-line pits, those cars, done as they should be. I mean, a pure effort would be, I think, pretty big deal. You know.
Okay. Well, there are a couple of guys out there currently that are running similar cars. Like, for instance, there's a fellow named Steve Magnante, and I can't remember the name of his car, but it's a true to the era, altered wheelbase, injected nitro car. In fact, if anybody can Google, just put injected nitro AFX in there, and you'll see there's a few guys that are out there now. They don't really get much in the way of publicity or ink or anything like that, but there are a few guys that run legit old school, I mean, stock suspension, steel wheels, injected nitro burning door slammers. And they're out there now. But like I said, they don't get much in the way of publicity or, exposure. But those cars exist.
Well, having some experience with writing rules for classes and stuff like that, the hardest part is to define the point at which you want to develop the rules around, right? So you can't just take his 1966 example. 1966, we already talked about it. You could have had altered wheelbase. You could have had an injected blown car. You could have had just an injected on nitro car. It's such a huge swath of stuff. But if you went back to
that's because by the time you get to 1966, there are no rules and there are no classes.
Right. So that's where you have to find the point at which before the wheels came off the bus. And that's the only way to really somewhat categorize it without it getting too crazy.
I think maybe the way to go is to pay the loser. That'll keep people from going too fast. I think maybe, you could have a show where the class of 62, a max wedge, a 409, a 406, class of 63, a lightweight Galaxy, another max wedge with aluminum nose, maybe a Z11, class of 64, okay, a Thunderbolt, a race Hemi, and then this, and then class of 65, and so they have 5 cars in each of these things and put that on as a show, the loser winning the money.
And you'd have to have a standard payout for the 5 cars where it's like, hey, you got $1,000 to show up for the group of 5, split it up however you feel it's necessary.
I'm all about safety. Nobody needs to die or get hurt. That sucks, you know what I mean? But basically slow them down. So they would run what they ran in the day and be penalized for, some guys trying to go 8s in a 10-second car. That's no good. But basically a visual show. And the Cackle Fest stuff the NHRA does, I love the spirit of that. But when they had to take the drive shaft coupler out between the tranny and the engine, I thought, oh, come on. This is like, it's like defanging the world's craziest snake and telling it to be happy. I just thought to myself, well, the Cackle stuff, it's cool. I appreciate it. It's better than nothing for sure. But the Cackle Fest, the cars don't move. And the nostalgia drag racing today, I get it. I'm going to piss off some people here, but the double roll bars and stuff, you got to have safety. I get it. Don't run them if you can't make them pure. Don't insult the history of these things. But with that said, I think that there's room somewhere for the class, just basically a traveling show, like maybe Bill Gates, if you're watching this, or Jay Leno or somebody would fund this thing. But I think it would be great to just put on a serious, well done cars. And if we can't get the Ram Chargers to allow us to use their name, maybe call them the Rum Chargers or the Rum Chasers, wink, wink, the Carcraft magazine. But make things that look the part mechanically and the graphics and stuff. Maybe stay away from vinyl. And again, here comes the soup Nazi.
Oh, I 100% agree with you on this, Steve, and I'm totally on board with. If you wanted to develop a class, we can come up with some basic rules to frame it out. No problem. I
think that your concept of the class of 63, class of 64, class of 65 is brilliant.
Yeah,
that is perfect. You limit the class to the tires, the technology, the everything that was available in that specific period of time. There are some issues with running higher powered cars. Like, okay, for example, and like Jim Barolero was a friend of mine. He has Chrisman's. He actually has the he passed away a couple of years ago. The Saxon Sons car and Nicholson's flip top car, and not Nicholson, Chrisman's flip top car. So one of the problems you have is that when you run, let's say, a blown nitro 1964-65 combination on a contemporary drag strip that's generally prepped to some extent. Okay. Like even what we consider to be no prep today is actually very prepped compared to the way they ran those cars. So those things were built, they were designed and tuned and engineered to spin the tires. Today, even with like you could pump 65 pounds into the slicks, the track is still grabby enough that those cars won't function correctly.
Right.
Well, maybe, again, I wouldn't suggest that we race the originals. Maybe we build the new ones, not detune them, but, make them so that they don't hurt themselves. And maybe even have the...
I always like the idea of, if you're doing a nostalgia race, I always felt it was kind of, I don't know if you want to call it cheesy or cliche to just copy somebody else's car, because that's be yourself, be original, be yourself, take 20 minutes, make your own logo. You're not getting paid the money that, let's say the Jungle Jim was going to get paid anyway. It's all for fun. So, go out there and be yourself.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to live off someone else's legacy.
Yeah. Well, like in my case, you know, when I did the Nova for Hot Rod magazine, and the truth be told, by the way, my original idea was a 65 Coronet or Belvedere. I wanted to do a Chrysler product, but I knew darn well, as did my editor, Ro McGonigal, that to put that sort of a thing in such a high profile place had to be a Chevy product. I came close to a 65 GTO, but the $3,000 for the shell was too much. So I bought that Nova for $800 from Rob Canan and the guys at Hot Rod. So, but anyway, with that said, when it came time to paint it, I knew that Seton Shaker, that beautiful white and orange, was nice, but I said, I can't go Seton because I'm not Seton. So I said, all right, Wilshire Shaker, Wilshire Boulevard, where Hot Rod magazine was located at the time. So the Wilshire Shaker was born, but it borrowed the colors. And I know that today, if you put ram charges on anything, there's going to be a few lawyers who are going to circle over your house with bombs. You don't want to be doing that either. Or Sox and Martin. But again, make it your own. But I think, you know, the graphics are important too. But
for sure. You've got to have something of the period. It's got to be correct from the period. But hey, we're getting way off a topic here. We'll go ahead and wrap this thing up. I appreciate you guys taking the time to get with me on this Sunday morning to get this thing going.
No, it was awesome.
Yeah, and Steve, I know it's taken some serious heartache on our end, just trying to make things meet up schedule-wise and time-wise and equipment-wise, but I really appreciate you taking the time to spend the time with us. Our audience, don't forget to head over to stevemags.com, buy some merchandise, get yourself an Alter Wheelbase book or video, and follow Steve on his automobile archaeology expeditions. Steve, where do you do? You're doing junkyard stuff still?
Yeah, well, certainly, you know, on Motor Trend, of course, there are 31 episodes of the Roadkill's Junkyard Gold, which is currently in hiatus, by the way, probably canceled, to be honest with you. It's been 2 years since we've done a new show, but I'm going to keep going with videos on the Steve Magnante YouTube channel. And I do also have a podcast every Monday and Wednesday, fresh episodes of the Steve Mags Muscle Car Show podcast, where I read from my book, Steve Magnante's 1001 Muscle Car Facts. And basically I read the facts, and then between the facts, I'll give a little bit of backstory on them. And in each episode, it's about 25, 30 minutes long, just right for your commute to and from the office. And again, every Monday and Wednesday, we have fresh episodes coming out. We're about to begin new episodes, but there's about 38 of those. So download them, they're free, and you know, drive along and listen to Muscle Car Facts from the past. So, yeah.
All right. And don't forget to visit Tony at UncleTony'sGarage.com. Get yourself some merch and a sketchy shirt. And as long as he has every color in stock, especially if they're just black.
Yeah, we carry all of the basic blacks. So, and with white, you know, lettering. But I gotta say, if you guys who are watching this aren't familiar with Steve, right? And I'm not sure you've seen him here or there, like one of the auctions or on TV shows. You got to understand something about this guy. There is nothing he does that isn't quality, right? Like he's a true gem in this business. So, you know, his YouTube channel, support it, do whatever you got to do. Let's get this guy. If anybody in this industry deserves 10 million subs, it's him. So get out there and spread the word.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. This has been another exciting episode of American Hot Rod Association Drag Racing History Channel. And visit us on AHRA online and get yourself a few decals, some shirts, a hat, whatever, or a membership. But continue to support us so we can continue to support you with these great shows. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And you got anything else?
I think we're good.
I just want to say we'll follow this up now, going from 1968 through 78 era.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.